welcome back to the Rural Resurrection channel. Today's video is about the hiring of a planning consultant. As always, before we get started, I need to remind you to hit that like and subscribe button. It not only helps you see more content from Rural Resurrection, but helps others find this channel as well. Hiring a planning consultant is not typically an easy process, but it is an important process. In addition to meeting the necessary legal requirements, you need to find the right fit for your community. Today, I have with me three individuals to discuss the hiring process. Bruce Fountain has an extensive background in planning and economic development. This includes experience in business recruitment, retention and expansion, comprehensive planning, strategic corridor planning studies, site planning, tax increment financing, and urban renewal projects. Bruce has served as both a planning commissioner and a city councilman in communities where he has lived. He has also served as the president of the Nebraska chapter of APA. Amy Haase is a principal and project manager with the Community Regional Planning Group at RGG Planning and Design. Over her 25-year career, she has led a wide range of projects providing comprehensive planning, housing market studies, and neighborhood and downtown revitalization studies for communities across the Midwest. Jeff Ray is a seasoned urban planner with over 3 decades of experience guiding land development, zoning administration, and community revitalization across both public and private sectors. As principal of Ray Planning Solutions LLC, he provides expert consulting to municipalities, counties, nonprofits, developers, specializing in comprehensive planning, downtown development, and entitlement strategies. He has also served as the president of Nebraska chapter of APA. Well, thank all three of you for coming on tonight to discuss this interesting issue of hiring a planning consultant. Without further ado, we'll start right into the questions. What is the most important question to ask during an interview?
I can maybe start off and then Jeff, if you want to jump in. So this one's a hard one. I think it can vary from community to community. One of the things that maybe popped into my head was it should be so much about the time you're going to spend the next 9, 12, 18 months with these folks. So are the people in the room that's people that you're going to see on the project on a daily basis? Who's going to be your main contact? Who are you going to have that like regular routine relationship with? I think that's probably of just understanding everybody's probably role that's there in the room that day that they're going to have on the project.
Yeah, Chris, I would agree with Amy too. I mean, it's critical that you're figuring out that personality and what that chemistry is for that team that you're going to be spending time with. So the question that I've learned from both the public sector and the private sector side is having the consultant give an example or tell us what is their plan for when things don't go as expected, because it happens very often. And then how are they able to be flexible and nimble and proceed down that path? And so you have an idea going in when you do run into hiccups and bumps, how are they going to be handled, as opposed to just being surprised and they're going one way and you're going the other and you end up in a little bit of a feud.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Both of your points are really good. I mean, looking at some of our past hiring processes, we've thought about who's in the room on both ends. Sometimes when you're hiring a planner, you're sometimes getting that project principal where if you're looking at the hours breakdown, their involvement is maybe 10% of the overall project. So it's important to have everybody in the room on both sides when discussing that subject.
And Chris, from a, I guess, community perspective, since I've been more on the actual government side, I think what I always look for, like you said, is who the actual people are going to be involved, but also, you know, they can get into a lot of times describing these great processes and different things, but I guess I want to find out more how they're going to adjust their processes to the realities of our community and our staff and our politics and that aspects. Like Jeff said, how do you how do you react on the fly kind of process?
Great point. Great. All right. Let's jump into the next one. Why should you be wary of the lowest price?
From a community standpoint, I'll jump in. I guess sometimes I think that kind of usually can be in the lowest amount of time that's going to be put into it, potentially by the consultants. Obviously, they got to pay for the staffing involved, and um, so dig into what you're getting for that price. Whether they're just trying to undercut, or whether those are senior staff level, or they're a lower level staff members they're using, or variety of things to dig into, I think.
Yeah, one of the, I mean, you don't want to go for the lowest bid. That's why you go through for an RFP process, rather than a bidding process, because you're looking for that expertise.
Right.
And we've seen lowest price sort of kick us in the back end at times, where you've seen boilerplating problems, you've seen commitment problems as well. Jeff or Amy, do you have anything else to put on that?
Yeah, I think I would add that, sometimes you have to be aware that you're actually getting everything that you want. And it's comparing apples to apples. And that probably leads into some of our other further discussion on making sure you put that information out to the consultants that are responding. Sometimes if the RFP is ambiguous, you'll get a watered down version that's maybe not as customized to your community that you're really expecting and then wanting, and therefore it's fewer hours and a lower price. So buyer beware and make sure you really know what you're getting for that price. And sometimes maybe they really want to work in your community due to a variety of other factors or other ties that they have to the community, so they will discount it.
Yeah, and I think this is also a really good opportunity, if that's a red flag, for you to, one, look really closely at what they have in that scope. I think is kind of what Jeff was saying too, especially probably around kind of some of the public engagement stuff, because that's where it can get really watered down. And then the other part of it probably too is looking, if that's a red flag, of really looking at their references then too, and kind of understanding if, what that's been, and maybe how that relates to them really understanding the project then too.
Yeah, and also there's the aspect of the expertise. You're buying that expertise, and so a lot of times to have that much expertise, you're going to have to pay more to get a really good product.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3, what are communities leaving out in their RFPs that they shouldn't?
I think I could just start right back into this right off of the last question. It's really, what is your expectation? Many consultants can provide a variety of level of service on a particular project. I think you need to be very upfront with them and transparent of like, hey, here is really what we want. We want X number of public meetings. We expect this type of graphics. We expect this type of final materials onto this particular schedule. If you know that going in, it makes it much easier to do, as instead as a consultant trying to guess how much do they really want to spend, or maybe even tell them exactly what you are planning to spend or what your budget range is. You can give a budget range, and it helps people understand, hey, are you really looking for a simplified version, or are you really looking for a lot of high expertise, hand holding, and public engagement to really get down to a fine level? But then the response is going to be based off of that amount of detail that you're able to provide to that consultant.
Yeah, I think that's all, like, the clarity piece is probably the best, the best advice there. I think the other way that I'd maybe turn in a little bit different direction of what's being left out, but also, what do you really need? Like, there's a little bit of that question of like, if I'm asking for this, is this really useful? Is this really going to help us in our decision? And so it's maybe a little bit of like, what information do we really need from them to help us make the decision that we need to make and what we need to understand about them. Yeah.
Yeah, I I was thinking about this as you're talking about that of what do we really need is when we go into the processes like this, what's being left out, and are we comparing apples to apples when a consultant comes in? Because a lot of times you have to guess what these communities want, and sometimes that increases your overall price, and then that can be kind of confusing because then they're not really reviewing apples to apples on those proposals.
Mhm.
And so your price might be higher, but you might be giving them exactly what they want, and the other consultant might not have thought of that. And so it's not really comparing those. Also, there's the aspect, I think all four of us at one time or another have been a consultant, and one of the scariest words is scope creep. We're all wary of that, when you have such a limited scope, that scope creep really comes up on you and bites you down the road.
I think that kind of comes back to some of the other previous questions you asked about, who's in the room, who's managing the project, who is going to be the face to face, and do they have that good understanding of the project to help guide you as the community through that process as well, so you don't end up with scope creep, or if you do, be very aware of what that additional time and or money could potentially be, and is that something you need now, or is it something you could do next year or in 2 years down the line as a different option?
Good point. All right. Number 4, what's the worst hiring process? Not naming any community names, but what's the worst hiring process you've been through?
I think the worst hiring process for me was doing the public interviews during a public meeting that was broadcast on the radio. It was very awkward to have the listen to it later of
Yeah.
the local broadcaster actually kind of giving a play-by-play commentary on the conversation that's going on between the city council and the consultant team. And it just never have it in a public meeting. It does not work. And it's not fair to the consultants that are doing that. It's just not the right environment at all.
Good point.
Yeah, I've had a couple where it's been kind of the council meetings, so they were public meetings, and yeah, it's an awkward sort of feel in the room. And I don't think you get a real sense of like being able to establish a connection with anybody too. I think, I've seen other odd ones over the years of where they've like broken teams up and created what we all refer to as forced marriages, which is it's sometimes okay, but sometimes it's really weird.
Yeah, sometimes you have to divorce your sub that you chose, that you have a
Yeah,
good relationship and have done good projects with, to go work with somebody else who was not your preference,
yeah,
and it doesn't always work.
yeah.
I think the other
So,
side of that, I've been in, I guess, a couple times where you can tell they've already made up their mind up, and the interview is just a formality. They're just,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
not really giving you the full attention or
I had one other interview too where we were getting very technical questions from one council member who um, was a principal at another firm that was also interviewing that night, which was really awkward, and felt like a huge conflict of interest. He was an engineer and not a planner, but it was back to Bruce's comment where you already knew where you were going. You're like, we knew this flag and we just waved right past it and said, well, they won't hire them because he's already on city council. But no, they did go that direction and made kind of everybody else look silly by asking these crazy off the wall questions to consultant teams.
Going back to your first example, as a bit of a remedy to that, and I think Amy kind of pointed towards it a little bit, was to kind of get around that aspect of, the public meeting aspect there of, having everybody involved and you're in the middle of a city council meeting or something like that of the process. Do you recommend maybe a separate group that doesn't constitute a quorum to be your interviewing group?
I think that's been the best situations that I've been in and been a part of in my 30 plus years. And then just making sure that the environment is set up right. So it's not you're not usually in the council chambers, just sit down at a table, have a normal conversation across the table as opposed to one group being elevated over the other, making sure your technology is all there and that it works properly. Those are good. And then just be able to schedule the time properly and don't jam them all together. So you have one group tearing down while another group's trying to set up because you're already 15 minutes into your hour interview process. Um, Setting that environment, I think, is really important. If this project's truly important to your community, sometimes you just get the feel that it's not really that important, or they don't really care about this process, and they just want to rush everybody through, and they put you all on an hour time schedule, everybody on the hour, and you get 45 minutes per person or per team, and then you got 15 minutes to tear down and set up, which is not enough usually for most teams. Most teams need 15 minutes to set up and an additional 15 minutes to tear down. So just think about who that process is, build in some safety time if people run over on their interviews or their questions or additional questions are aroused or raised.
Yeah, I think that's all. Yeah, really good points. On like kind of the makeup of the team too. I think, I had a community that we talked a lot about. It's the community's plan. So I mean, there's a little bit of like it depends on the type of planning project you're doing, right? But if you want to think of it as the community's plan, then um, going beyond just like council members is always good because then, you don't want it to feel like it's just the council's plan kind of thing. It's also kind of depends on your community's politics, I think too. So you got to read that. But, at the end of the day, who you want the community, you want different groups to kind of own the plan a lot of times. So who might help you at the end of the process build ownership is maybe a good way to think about who can help you at the, who do you want them at the very beginning?
All right. I also think that breaks are a really good idea, not just for the 15 minutes for setup and the 15 minutes for taking down, but who's doing the interviewing needs the breaks. They need the mental cut off. They need a bathroom break. They need food or something like that. You need to give plenty of time in between. Anything else on that one? All
No.
right. What is important to look for when finding the right consultant?
I'll maybe go first, I guess, and then I'm sure Jeff will give a really good response here. But I think first it probably should start with this expertise. Do they have the expertise in the specific type of planning project that you're trying to do? Do they bring some of that expertise? Do they just feel like they're the kind of right, I don't know how else to say it. Do they feel like they're the right cultural fit with your community in the sense of do they understand, that they can't just cookie cutter apply their process? Does it feel like they're really understanding your community and making that connection there? I think is probably another really important part to it. And in that same sense, if they have that, they're probably feeling like they're connecting with that you're going to have a really strong management team of the city and the consultant together because that gets, I think, to the point Jeff made earlier. when you've got that good relationship in that management team, um, when you hit that bump in the road, it's a lot easier to deal with.
Mhm. I think those are all really good points, and just being able to ensure that the consultant team understands your community a little bit. If you're in a small town, particularly further western Nebraska, and everybody comes in and it's got loafers and Italian suits on, it just doesn't fit. I mean, you just like, do you really know who we are? I mean, this is not how we dress ever. It just looks completely out of place, and it feels like it becomes top down at that point. So you want to make sure that they're going to be able to listen to you and to understand you as a community, as Amy had alluded to. So I think that's really the most important thing, is that are they are they the right fit? Are they the right chemistry? And it's like any other relationship, or almost like a dating relationship type of feel of, will this work, or won't this work? There's different clues that you get during that short time together, as to whether or not this is really going to work for you and the community, or should you move on to somebody else.
Yeah, Chad, that's what I was just going to say too. If you can figure out if there's how the chemistry is in a short time through an interview, but big part of that is they seem to listen well to your group as things are going on and ask questions. I like when they ask good questions and maybe give you a little pushback on uh, things you're thinking, and offer other suggestions. I think that, again, figuring out whether it's going to be a good working relationship, because depending on the project, it could be working for months, potentially years on a project with them. I think sometimes that's a good thing when you're dealing with uh, consultants in your area that that you've worked with, or you have relationships through APA or other groups. But even when you don't, you need to try to get through that interview and see whether you feel like those people get what's going on in your community. And as Jeff said,
Yeah,
And
sorry,
some
go
of
ahead.
that comes from even from the response to the proposal. I just was helping a community today um, do some responses. They were looking at some responses, and in their cover letter, they specifically called out the community as being forgotten and losing population, and which isn't true. So it was like, what? I don't know who you're talking about, because this community is continuing to thrive and is gaining population and jobs and housing. But there's much more felt like they were trying to turn the community around as opposed to help guide them down the future. So I think some of those things you see up front as to whether or not the consultant team even understands the community before they come in for the interview process is really important as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking about our actual current consultant RDG for one of our projects, Bruce Niedermeyer, who is the uh, project manager, has also been is a project manager for our facility study. This guy's a landscape architect, but he's a project manager for facilities studies. So, but we just have this uh, ongoing relationship between him and all the members of the staff here, that I think that builds that comfort level, and it's important to have that comfort level there. Um, Whoever you're selecting is to have that conversational mode with them, to be able to um, have that up front is highly important, not just at the hiring stage, but when uh, the poo hits the fan down the road, if there's issues. I I always like to go back to my early days of when I was at Southern Iowa Council of Governments. I would go into city council meetings with a dress shirt and a tie and all that stuff, and a little town of, I think it was New Virginia, Iowa. they had Saturday meetings, and I went into my first meeting like that, and the mayor came in shorts that were just tattered and cut off, and he was chewing on a cigar, and he had a hat on, and he just sat down in his chair and he said, "I don't want to see you dressed in that again." I never did. You for planning consultants, you need to know your audience, but for these small towns, they need to express that to the planning consultants too.
Mhm.
You need to know us, and you need to get used to us. Okay, moving on. Um, Important things to remember when setting up interviews.
I think Jeff had a lot of really good points earlier. The one that probably the thing that I would take on is it's not so much about the setup of the interview, but the number of interviews you do. Um, and I would really encourage that, I mean, in my opinion, get it down to like 3 if possible. Um, One is I think that allows you to actually do them all in one day. More than that, I mean, I'm thinking of this from like the other side of the table and the reviewer. I mean, sitting through more than 3 interviews in a day, I would think would be a lot because you do want to give everybody a good amount of time. That might be the one thing I'd say about setting up. I mean, if you can give them an hour, take an hour, even if it's just to say we want to have a big cushion for Q&A. I think is a really good idea. But I don't know, it just seems like a lot if you're doing more than that. Um, and so I think just, yeah, tagging on to what Jeff said, the big thing would probably be the number.
Yeah, and I would add on to what Amy said. I think if you can do 2 or 3 interviews, that would be great. I mean, one, it's so much easier on the community, but two, it'd be fair to the consultants. It takes a substantial amount of time to prepare your presentation for the consultant team to gather and to travel and then do the interview, where that's lost opportunity to something else. So be fair to them and considerate of their time as well, because it's not an inexpensive process that you're throwing out that all just falls into your marketing budget as well. The other thing I would say is when you're setting up the interviews, is like be flexible and plan it out well in advance so people understand. I've gotten phone calls or emails on Thursday afternoon, like, okay, the interview is Tuesday morning at 9, and you're like, okay, I've got other things going, and you've got to drop everything to try to do that. Um, and there was one project I remember in specific that they insisted that that's when we were going to do it, and we said, thanks, but we're probably not the right consultant for you then at that point, because we just realized that they were going to be difficult all the way through, and it didn't work on our side as well. So
Mhm.
be flexible on that and with the time, and let people know as far in advance as possible as to when those interviews or potential time windows are set up.
Yeah, I think Jeff's point about the amount of time and that feeds back and the amount of time that we as consultants try to put into it. I mean, we try to take these pretty seriously and try to put in good time and effort into preparing for them. So I think that also feeds back with like, don't, you know, a 20-minute interview, if you're asking us to travel hours and put a lot of prep work together and then we're going to give you 20 minutes, that one's really hard too, to be like, okay, are you really taking this project seriously? Um, it's kind of a red flag for us a little bit in that sense. And I would, yeah, I think the flexible part is so true. Yeah, I mean, I might have a full day of listening sessions that it's like, whew, we can't move that to make this work today. So I think some flexibility. At the same time, I would caution that I've seen communities that will like do all their interviews and then literally like a week later do the other one. That one always makes me, I don't know, a little concerned on my side because I'll be honest, it comes down to, are they just remembering the last person they talked to, kind of thing. So, I think there's that balance of trying, have maybe a few dates marked out, like here's 3 days all within, a pretty close time period, what works best for you kind of thing, if possible.
I think from a community perspective, again, we always like to know that the person leading the project is going to be in the room. It's like you may need to ask for that up front to make sure that person's available. If they bring the key people, I guess it's kind of if they don't, then it may be a negative sign on them. But again, like you said, timing, I like to not over script it, to be able to have some conversation, see where it might lead when you're discussing things with them, and not be held to, specific questions and your timeline and you're done. You got to have a little bit of area in there to expound upon things if you want to ask additional questions.
Yeah, in relation to Bruce's comment, bringing the entire team, you need to make sure your room is big enough so that everybody's comfortable in there. Because you don't know how big, you need to know how big the team is that's coming in and adjust accordingly to not only that team as well as your whoever's doing the interviewing. And then you're also going to have, depending on how you line up your interviews, possibly consultants arriving early. So do you have a vestibule for them to stay in, outside of the council chambers or wherever you're having it at, or do you need to provide more time so that there's not that overlap of consultants looking at each other outside the doors to the room? So anything else on that one?
Yeah.
All right. Backing up a little bit, let's look at what are important things to look for when reviewing proposals.
I think that the proposal should be easy for you to read and to understand exactly what they're proposing to give to you, including not only the fee but the schedule, and then what are those deliverables. If you have to reach really hard to understand what they're talking about or how it's applicable to you, that's probably a pretty big red flag. Typically, the responses to RFPs should lay out the exact same format and order that you've asked those questions in, particularly if you have a scoring matrix. That should allow the person who is scoring to go through the proposal in a chronological way and not have to jump around back and forth and say, did they cover that? Did they not cover this? Those types of things. That's the easy way for the consultant to make sure that they have everything, and that's really what you're looking for and really what you want, and that's how it's laid out in your RFP. Then that's how the response in the proposal should look as well. I think some of the other things to look for are like misspelled words, wrong community names. I've seen that. Those are embarrassing.
I was just going to expand on that a little bit again. When you're looking through it, what we talked about earlier, does it appear that they understand your community? And then, as Jeff mentioned, when I'm looking at it, is it easy to follow and understand? Can I actually explain their approach to somebody else easily that may not be in the room at the time? And, do their scopes and timelines all meet up with what we're asking for?
Yeah, I think all of those are good. I think, and it really boils down to, as planners, it's a reflection probably of the end product you're going to get. So, it's not like we're architects or engineers and you're like, oh, it's the drawings. In a way, it should be, is it graphically appealing in the way that you want it to be? Is it feeling like they're understanding your community? And I think those are all good. I almost wanted to turn this question, be like, what do you guys want to hear? What do you find is rare? But yeah, I think all of those, and I think that it also kind of goes back to, Jeff made a really good point at the beginning about it being kind of clear and concise, or, you don't need a 200-page document. But I think that also then goes back to, what do you want to learn about this consulting team when you get the proposal? So making sure you're really clear and asking for those specific things.
Yeah, getting back to Bruce's point on the knowing who you're who's a knowing who the community is really, knowing that is really important. Is you can read through these proposals and you can see what consultant has really taken the time to drive through your community, to walk through your community, to uh, really get a feel for what you're wanting to do. I've seen proposals where they've interviewed us as a community, and it's been 5, 10, 15-minute interviews at most, and for a rather sizable project. And you can tell once they get done with the proposal, it's not up to par because they don't know what exactly you're looking for. So, anything else on that one on proposals?
I think we've kind of alluded to this. It's the consultant needs to be your trusted advisor, right? And as trust goes, so goes the relationship. So it's an intertwined process, and it's iterative. It goes back and forth, and that all starts at that proposal process where you're able to say, okay, I trust this consultant. They're going down the right path. They're going to do what's in our best interest, and they're really going to supply the product and the deliverable that we want and that we need, and that they're able to do that. If that's what you're really looking for in that proposal.
And I think Amy had a really good point on the proposal itself. It's sort of a reflection of what you're going to get as well. She was talking about the design of the proposal, how it looked. That's a reflection of what you're going to get as a final product, whether it's a comprehensive plan or a housing study or anything like that. A lot of times it's a reflection of what you're going to get as an end result.
Mm-hmm. Chris, you mentioned something too. I think that's interesting, and communities have, and I think even consultants have different perspectives on this, and that is how much you're willing to talk to the consultant before too, because that can really help them tailor it. I think it's highly appreciated when some of that can be available, but I also appreciate that it's got to be 100% kind of like equal opportunity on that front. But those do help kind of tailor that a little bit more. And if you provide that and they don't tailor it, that's usually a good red flag.
Yeah. Well, I guess related to that, it's I think you pointed it as a subject that should be discussed, is structuring that so that the consultants each get their opportunity to ask any questions about the proposal that they have, and then getting that back out to all the other consultants if there's been something that was missed in the proposal and all that stuff, so that everybody's on the same level. Take, for instance, you left something out in the proposal. All the other consultants need to know what needs to be
Right.
remembered when they're putting in their own proposal.
Yep.
In the RFP. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And I will say thank goodness, this is something we don't usually see with more rural communities. It's something we'll see with much, our large urban areas, and that's pre-proposal meetings. And they can be okay, but I don't know. Jeff might have a different opinion on this, but frankly, we don't usually get much of them because people they're being very conscious of who else is in the room and what questions they're going to ask. And I don't know. I think it seems to me it'd be a lot easier to just say, email your questions or call with a question, and we'll put in all the answers and get it back out, or even just saying, email us and let us know you're interested so we can provide you with any follow-up information, clarifications, or anything like that, rather than doing the pre-proposal meeting. But that's my take.
I agree. A pre-proposal meeting for me is just who's in the room.
Yeah.
Who's gonna, oh, ABC is here. Well, they've been doing work here for 20 years. Looks like I'm out. Or do I need to team with them?
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. But yeah, there's usually very little constructive information that comes back to you as a consultant from a pre-proposal meeting because it's reiterating everything that's already in the proposal.
Yeah. There's one organization that like every proposal they put out, they have like the same PowerPoint that they give. And I'm like, can I just give it for you? Yeah.
All righty. I guess that leads me into the final question of the night is what is the funniest story that you've had from a hiring process?
Depends on how you define funny, because sometimes it's kind of like a horrifying funny. I've had one where we interviewed with the political body, and then they called all of the consultants into the room for a public meeting and debated us in front of everybody. And the planning world's small. We all know each other. We all have maybe worked together or teamed together on different projects, and you're kind of embarrassed for your friends, or you get embarrassed in front of your friends if they're saying something negative about you, or it was extremely awkward, and just felt really weird. Like, I didn't even want to look at anybody. I just looked down the whole time, like, oh, you're just bagging on my buddy over there. She really was not that bad, you know. It's just, uh, it was really hard. Um, I think one other funny story I had, we were doing an interview and we just started. We got about 3 slides in, and the bulb went out on the PowerPoint. And we didn't know what to do. We're like, what do we do? We could just like make shadows on the wall, the sock puppet kind of thing. Like, what? How do we finish this? So we ended up having to reschedule, but it was kind of weird too. A very stressful situation there for a minute. Like, I don't even know what I'm supposed to say next because it's supposed to be on the next slide, and I don't have a cue for. But those are a couple of mine. I think another one I've had that's just seen that I've embarrassed myself with typos.
Mm.
The word public looks an awful lot like another word, and it's embarrassing when you see that up there on the screen, and particularly when they pointed out that you typed pubic instead of public, and you're like, we ran it through spell check and it worked, but it's not the right word. So you have to be very careful in doing some of those. And I think they're probably funny for other people, but not when you're involved.
Yeah. On the bulb, this has actually literally happened in the last 2 months, I think. It wasn't that anything went out, all the slides flipped upside down. There was some weird technology issue thing, and our slides literally did like a 180, and we were like, okay, everybody just do this. We joked about that, but we kind of were like, okay, I guess we'll kind of go on. And then they brought in their IT guy and got it figured out because we were connecting into their system. But yeah, it must have worked out okay because they realized we were good of improvising on the fly because we got the job. So. But it was like, everybody just do this. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. That one we did all have to kind of like chuckle about because you're like, no one would have like could have planned this. Yeah, I think one of the other ones, this was many years ago, and had a newer, younger planner and I were headed to the interview together. Had my laptop out, had my head down. They were new to the area, wasn't paying attention that I was supposed to be giving them directions. And all of a sudden looked up and I was like, we're going through a wrong town. You missed a turn someplace. So we like back roaded it all the like got there like literally like running in the door, went from like having a nice cushion to we are now late, we're running in the door, get up there and we're like, okay, we like literally like just made it on time, and the group that was supposed to be interviewing before us was still standing out in the hallway because they were running so far behind on the first
Oh,
group.
no.
I think they must have been interviewing three and we were the third. Yeah. So it was like, okay, we made it. Okay, never mind. Yeah. So I still have moments of panic when I drive through this little town and like we're going.
Anybody else with anything?
It's an awkward one, I guess, back from when I was in a consulting firm, and this not really funny, but it just says this after the interview, and we actually got selected as part of several teams that they picked that they didn't tell us they were going to split the project up into multiple teams, and we had teamed with a kind of an expert out of Philadelphia to help build our team on specific topics that they were interested in. And by the time they got done tearing their scope apart and cutting the project up, we couldn't afford to have that person on our team anymore. So we had to go back to them and say, yeah, we can still do it, but we're not going to be able to provide that portion anymore based on your budget.
You get 2 hours.
Definitely had those. Yeah.
All righty. Well, I want to thank all three of you for jumping on this video tonight. I think it's been really good. I think a lot of communities will like to hear what was said tonight, and I appreciate y'all for jumping on. I look forward to seeing all of you at the Nebraska Planning Conference here in March of 26, and have a good night.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.